Do you hear that?
Yes.
Go ahead and I'm going to mute myself. Go ahead and introduce yourself however you want. And the floor is yours, big dog.
Hi, my name's Todd. Stop it for a minute. Can you stop it, Will? Hi, my name is Todd K, and I'm an alcoholic, drug addict. And I've been sober now for going on about 19 months this time. There have been other times I've been sober too, but this is the longest I've had and aware of the change in me through Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, this all started when I was younger. I didn't drink or use till I got into my early 20s. But when I was younger growing up, I grew up in a fairly normal household, but my parents were not happy people. They didn't like each other. Most of my childhood memories are just anger, yelling, screaming, very little affection, if any, no hugging, very little hugging, kissing, that kind of thing with your parents. None of that really happened. I had a younger brother who has passed on, um, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But anyhow, through the childhood, so I was a pretty strong-willed little kid. Um, my parents didn't drink, but they were miserable, uh, and that kind of rubbed off on me. They raised me as an atheist. We didn't. I never went to church. I can remember, probably count on one hand how many times I went to church with my parents. I remember that movie, The Omen, where the kid goes to church and starts screaming and yelling. I think that was me. I was a little devil. But anyhow, so I couldn't wait to get out of the house. Now, when I turned about 16, and I'm an old school guy, so I grew up over in Arizona. When you turn 19, you could have drank alcohol at that point. So everybody was drinking at an early age. If you had facial hair, you were buying beer. You know, they didn't encourage you. So it was a little bit different for me. I didn't like drinking though, but it gave me courage. It was that we call that bottle of courage. It would open me up, and I liked girls, and I wanted to meet girls, and I wanted to, get married and some of that kind of thing. So I realized that alcohol was one of those things that helped lower my inhibitions. I'd go to the dance, I'd go to the disco and disco dance, which I would not do sober. I dabbled a little bit in drugs, but not much. It was mostly alcohol. And again, I didn't even really like drinking it, but I realized I was doing it because I wanted to meet girls. Maybe the wrong kind of girls, but that's just how I was, who I hung around with and my friends. So through high school, mostly there was not any really drug use or alcohol use. I had a few friends that played sports with me. I was on the football team. So one of the things that kept me away from doing drugs was the fact that I wanted to play sports. And I knew that I wasn't one of those naturally gifted athletes that could jump 10 feet in the air, could, lift all kinds of weight without working out. I barely had enough to just make it on the team, make the team kind of thing. And so I knew if I did anything to hamper that, I wouldn't make the team. So the drugs, I stayed away from that quite a bit just because I wanted to play sports. And so some of the friends of mine in high school would also like to party. And we'd go out with them, but we wouldn't hang out because I didn't want to do drugs with them. So I ended up becoming more of a loner in high school. Actually started going out with other kids from other schools that I knew were straight. But what happened is then I ended up, because of the home life, I couldn't wait to get out. So I took off for college my junior year. I was in a junior college my freshman and sophomore year. And took off to junior college. And that's when I realized, wow, life without mom and dad is going to be great. I was in my own world. I could do my own thing, go to bed, come home, do whatever I wanted, have whoever friends I wanted who come over. All the things that my parents forbade me from doing, I was able to do now. And at that point, I realized I went to college on a partial scholarship for football. And when I got there, the realization hit me was, man, there's a lot of guys a lot better than you. And the realization kind of started setting in that this was not going to be my pursuit in life. And it kind of took the wind out of my sails. My parents, like I said, I didn't hang around my parents very much at all. If I could get away from them every chance I did. So there was no interaction with my dad. So I was kind of one of those kids. I didn't know how to do a damn thing. I couldn't do anything. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have the stuff, all that kind of stuff that you can learn off of now. I had to rely on my dad. My dad didn't teach me anything. So I was really unskilled and I had nowhere to go. So my junior year in college, I started using drugs, mostly marijuana, but I was still drinking a lot. And that's when my drinking actually started quite a bit, was in college. And that's when I started to like drinking. So I started dabbling in drugs my junior year. And by my senior year, I was selling. And I was one of those kids that I came from I want to say affluent family. My parents had money and they had stuff. So I wanted to keep that stuff. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't have any skills. I wasn't going to work at a construction site or something like that because that was minimum wage money and I didn't want that. So I got into selling drugs. Very stupid, but it was what I was doing. God must have been watching over me because I did a lot of stupid things and I never got caught. And back in those days, you got caught with selling drugs and you were in a serious world of hurt. So that, as I look back, I definitely know that God had to have his hand over me, even though I didn't even believe in God. So my senior year, I met my wife and she was in college at the same time. And we fell in love. We loved to party together. We liked the same music. We liked a lot of the same things. And so we both kind of were going down a path we didn't want to be going down. The path of, a single person going out and having relationships, one-nighters and that kind of thing. So, and then drinking and the drugging. And so we kind of bonded because of that. We both we didn't want to quit. We wanted to get it under control. And we knew we needed each other to do that. And so that's how we became a couple. We got married. And after college, I packed up and moved over to California. And but I was still selling drugs. And it ended up, I never did get caught, thank God. But it cost me a lot. And one of the things that I've learned in life is ill-gotten gains. If you make money the wrong way, it's going to go out the door. God's going to see to it that you're not going to keep it. Something's going to happen down the road. And you're going to end up losing that money. And I know that God doesn't bless people that do things like that. So I understood that I couldn't do this. But I couldn't give up using the drugs. Why? Because I had no way to deal with all that anger, that hatred to my parents when I was younger, and the things that I didn't like. I was mad at God for giving me he didn't give me the God-given abilities that he gave the guy next door. Why me? So I was mad at God even though I didn't believe in God. And I was really mad at my parents because they didn't give me any skill or anything, but I was not about to go back and ask them for a damn thing. I was, like I said, when I moved out of there, I told them, you're never going to see your grandkids again. I mean, when I have grandkids, you're never going to see them. And I meant it. That's how mad I was. That's the kind of relationship I have with my parents. So when I moved over to California, like I said, we both worked. And that's when I realized I couldn't sell drugs anymore and couldn't party. I had to become a real person and go to work. During that time, though, I didn't want to give up using. And my wife and I still partied together now and then. We ended up having our first child. She gave up drinking and using. And then after that, we started partying a little bit more again. I stopped also during the first pregnancy. Second one, she stopped completely. And this was in 1991 is when she actually got clean and sober. She still did drink now and then, but but there was the drugs and stuff were gone, and she had pretty much white knuckled it and became a good mother. But me as a father, I was not a good father. I mean, I showed up, I was there, I loved my kids, I did a lot of things with them, but I was not mentally completely there because I was using. During my kids growing up, I missed sporting events, I missed back to school nights, I missed other things because I was loaded. And what ended up happening is those those early on regrets that I had ended up making me want to use to forget those. But then what would happen is I would use, and then I'd have another regretful moment. And then I'd have to use to forget that moment. And it just became this vicious circle, and I couldn't get out of it. I could not get out of it. So I ended up going to rehab. I didn't want to be there. It was a 12-step kind of a rehab, but it was a house where I was there, locked down for 4 weeks. And the first time I went, I came out. I was okay for about 6 months, and then that went sour. After that, I ended up using for another 10, 15 years, and I hit it quite well. There would be times when I'd go a year without using, or maybe 2 years, but eventually I'd go back to using, and I'd get caught. I never got caught by the police. Another miracle, because I did a lot of stupid things, even in my older age, with drugs and alcohol. I got a couple DUIs, and I still drank and used. I mean, just the stupidity of it all. Is, looking back on it, just like, wow, man, you were really dumb. And so I couldn't figure out a way to stop myself from using. And then people said, you know what? You need AA. AA is where you got to go. And I was thinking, I'm not really an alcoholic. I'm just a drug addict. I don't need to quit drinking. I need to quit using drugs. I still want to drink. I still want to go to the bars and watch the games and hang out with my buddies. But, I just need to quit using drugs. And that ended up happening. I ended up white knuckling that. I didn't go to AA. I went to AA a few times. Of course, the DUI is your court ordered. But I did go a few times to AA, a few meetings. I listened to it. I read those things on the wall. Man, those are very honorable things. There's something good here. This is a good program, but it's not for me. I don't need this. So I ended up white knuckling the drug thing, but I started drinking, and then my drinking went full blown. I was drinking a bottle of 101 a day. I mean, a big quart bottle, from morning till night. I had my son with me. He was away in high school. We moved to another district so he could play on this football team. And I just remember I was drunk 90% of the time. I'd go down and talk to the coach and just, blathering, saying things to him, just drunk off my ass. I remember one time I went into the coach's booth during a game and started yelling at the coaches during the game. I mean, I was just a mean, ugly alcoholic. Then what ended up happening is I ended up having to move back home. My son ended up blowing his knee out his senior year, so that didn't pan out for him. So we ended up moving back home, but my drinking didn't stop. And I'll remember there was one night I got so mad I punched a hole in the wall. I was not a violent person, never hit my kids, my wife. We never spanked our kids. In fact, we got the belt when we were growing up, and we swore that we would. That was another thing my wife and I bonded on. We swore we would never whip our kids. We both our parents made us eat certain foods too. Peas were one of them, and I hated peas. But you get to the dinner table and it's like, you ain't leaving till you eat those peas. You ain't eat till you leave those peas. And that was the thing my wife and I bonded. For some reason, her parents made her eat the peas, and I had to eat the peas too. Anyhow, it kind of lost my train of thought there, but the bottom line is I ended up, the alcohol just made me a mean, ornery person. And I was made because I was mad. I was mad at myself. So when I wasn't when I wasn't drunk and I was sober, I was mad. I was mad at the world. I was mad at myself. I was mad at the traffic. I was mad because, the people at my work were making bad decisions. It was costing me. I'm having to work harder because of these stupid people. And so I was drinking all the time, morning, noon, and night. Um, one of the one of the things that happened was I told you I punched a hole in the wall when I came back with my wife, and she packed the kids up and took off. And that was one of the first um, things so it started my understanding this alcohol is a big problem. It didn't end there. Went for a good another 6 to 8 months. I put on 50 pounds. I was a big fat mess, and I was one of those kids where, like I told you, I played sports my whole life, so I was really into health, and I would make fun of people that were fat or heavy. And here I am, a big, heavy person. I was 6 foot, about 290, and big fat face, and I just looked like a big balloon, basically. So then I hated myself for that too. And so that just kept me drinking more. I couldn't give up the booze because I felt bad. And of course, you drink, you don't want to work out, you don't want to exercise, you don't want to do anything. So the drinking became a real problem for me. And for some reason, I ended up quitting drinking. But then what ended up happening was I went back to my drug of choice. And I was talking to Will earlier that when I would quit using, I would go back to drinking. But then the drinking would lower my inhibitions, and it would start this process in my brain again of, oh, you know what, it's not that big a deal. You can, yeah, you know what, that kind of thought that comes in there when you start drinking and you start using it lowers your mental toughness, so to speak. And so the alcohol, just I could not figure out a way to give up the alcohol. So when I ended up giving it up, it was probably about 3 years ago that I gave up drinking, but I was using. And I was using not just a little, I was overdoing it. I mean, I was going crazy. Wouldn't come home for days. I didn't use in front of my family, but when I used, I wouldn't come home. Of course, I couldn't come home. My wife wouldn't let me come home. So to say that I used when I was away from, she just wouldn't let me come home when I was loaded. So this last time, as I told you, my drug use spun out of control. I ended up having to go back to rehab this time. This was another rehab. And I've been to psychologists, and I've been to therapists, and I've been to rehab. And this is the second rehab I went to. Something kind of clicked in me this time, though. A little bit more clicked, and I started to participate in the rehab, which was Alcoholics Anonymous based, but there was a lot of drug users in there as well. So I would participate. I participated a lot more than I did in the past. I was a very solemn individual. I kept a lot of stuff inside, as you can well imagine. I wasn't used to letting stuff out, being the way I was raised. I kept everything inside. Like I said, there was no affection, so there was no way to let anything out. But this time when I was in rehab, for some reason, there was a lot of younger kids there. I think maybe that had something to do with it. I think maybe I felt like more of a mentor or older person. Maybe I can help these kids out a little bit. And I think that kind of opened me up a little bit. So I ended up going to rehab for 30 days. I ended up leaving rehab, and I had to go stay at, I want to say it's it wasn't a sober house, but I had to go live with a couple other people for about 4 months before I was allowed to come back home this time. My daughter was afraid of me. My wife had served me with papers and said, you do one more time and those papers are going. Those papers are going to the lawyer. I was $40,000 in debt because of credit cards. I owned my own business, and I also worked for another company on the side. I was basically lost all trust with everybody, and I didn't have anywhere else to go. And this last time, when I got out of rehab and I went and lived for 4 months, and then I came back home, I started using again. And that's when the wife said, "Listen, this is it. This is it. I'm serving you with papers." My daughter was afraid of me. Like I said, I was in debt. And so about 19 months ago, I started going to a AA meeting. It was a morning meeting. And I told myself, this time, Todd, you're going to have to try to participate. You're going to have to. And so I went in there with the mindset of, I'm going to kind of treat this as like the gym. Every morning I'm going to go to the gym, and AA is going to be my gym for not my physical, but my mental state, trying to get my mental capabilities back. And so as I went there, I started to do a little bit of participation. I started to talk a little bit, and that brought some things out in me. And as I participated more and more, I started to realize that I might be onto something here. One of the things that happened in my early on sobriety was step 3 of the 12 steps. It talks about turning your will and your life over to God. Now, or a higher power, or something that's outside of yourself. And I really had a tough time with that. But what ended up happening was, as I started to do the steps, that willpower, that nut, that shell started to get cracked, and I started to see that, hey, wait a minute, there is something bigger than me. There is something in control. Now, I didn't trust it by any means. I mean, I dipped my toe in the water, and I messed up quite a bit. Didn't use or anything, but I was mentally still pretty messed up. And then by the time I got through the 3rd step, things started to become clearer and clearer. And the one thing that I loved about AA was it started to teach me, it's not about you, Todd. It is, you got to get sober, but you got to help other people. And I started to realize that great leaders are great servers. And, I've always had this thing, I've told you I wanted to be a professional football player. So I always had this thing about being something big. And that was one of the things that stuck with me. Great leaders, great servers, but it didn't make sense. How do you become great if you're serving a bunch of people? It didn't make sense to me. But what ended up happening was, as I came to AA every morning, I was doing the morning meetings, I was coming every morning, just like the gym, and I had to participate. You go to the gym and look at the gym equipment and then turn around and walk out? No, you have to use the equipment, right? So I had to do the steps. And when I did the steps, it's, like I said, things started to happen. It took me a while to get a sponsor. I didn't get a sponsor for the first year. I ended up getting 2 sponsors, a spiritual sponsor and a flesh sponsor, I called it. One was to help me understand what was going on in my head. The other was to actually do the work. Write the things down, go, do, be, that kind of thing. And it really helped me because the spiritual part of me was a really tough thing for me to understand. I could check the boxes. I went to the meeting, I did this, but the spiritual stuff, that was the hard stuff to understand. And only through doing the steps did I realize I was gonna be able to accomplish this. My wiring was messed up. All the years of using, I had rewired myself, and I had to unwire it, the bad wiring. So I had to undo all that wiring that I had used for all these years. So it's a very difficult process. I'm gonna say difficult because it is. You're gonna face some trials and tribulations through this, and it's going to be tough that you want to run off and use because you know with that immediate gratification that thing is going to give it to you, but you gotta kind of white knuckle it through. The difference is you don't have to do it by yourself. And AA teaches you that you've got people that care about you. It's very different from what I was raised. Like I told you, my parents weren't close, and so it took me a while to trust the AA people. But once I started to do that and do the steps, things started to become very, very clear. And one of the things that really has stuck with me is, I was looking for something to manage my pain, and the people in AA are, and some of these other groups that are listening, is they teach you how to deal with the pain without using substances. because they've been there. They've gone through the pain, so they can show you, they can walk you through it. And the other stories are the redemption. My gosh, the people that I've met in the last 2 years in AA, it's like, wow, you used to be like that. You're kidding me. And you're this person now? I mean, the stories of redemption, you can't pay, you can't buy this stuff. You can't read it in a book. You got to meet these people and you got to see how they do it. And it really, really makes a difference. So one of the things I would really, really try to encourage people is you're going to have to get outside yourself. You're going to have to participate, and you're going to have to immerse yourself in whatever program you're trying to do. The spiritual part of this is really where it comes from. You have to be honest with yourself and people around you. And that honesty will help you understand the spiritual side a lot better. One of the things that breaks your spiritual relationships with God is lying and using. God doesn't deal with those. God only deals with people that are straight and they're outside of them. They're looking to God for help. They're looking for His will. They want to talk to God and relate to Him. And so I would really encourage, if anyone really wants to change. I know some people are in different states of mind, and sometimes you might hear something that's going to help you, maybe years later, maybe today. But it's a program that is going to assist you to give up and fix that thing between your ears that's causing you most of your problems. Alcoholism, all these other isms. I don't want to diminish cancer, but it really is like cancer. How do you manage your cancer? Well, you go to A, or how do you manage your alcoholism? You go to AA, you get yourself involved, you do things, and your alcoholism will go into remission. It'll never go away. It's always going to be there. You go out one time and there it is. Cancer is a little bit different, I understand, but it'll go into remission, and it can come back at any time, and so can alcoholism. And so kind of keep that in mind when you're thinking about what is alcoholism. Alcoholism is a disease that you can't get rid of now. You've got it and you're never going to be able to get rid of it. For some people, it's going to be worse than others, but it's going to be a situation where you're going to have to maintain, you're going to have to do the hard things. The chemotherapy for alcoholics, you got to go to the meetings, you got to participate, you got to step outside yourself. It's hard, it hurts, it's tough, it puts you in vulnerable situations, but these are the things that have changed me. These are the things that have changed me. And now when I come home at night, my wife kisses me instead of looks in my eyes and wonders, am I loaded? When I don't call and I have to come home late at work, these are still little triggers on her, but she knows now Todd's straight. He's on it. He's better now. And so a lot of this stuff diminishes and goes away, and the things that you thought you'd never have again, you're going to get back. There's instances where that first football game that I missed because I was low to my son, I can't get that back. But I can get that relationship back with my son that I desperately want. And again, I think my son desperately wants it too. So anyhow, that's my story in a nutshell, and I appreciate you guys listening. And thank you very much. And again, my name is Todd, and I am an alcoholic.